Hello. Right, I'm now wired for sound. Right, I am Sarah Haynes and I am now a consultant, but for 20 years I worked for HSE and I did what Chris and Tao did for the last 7 years of my career. So, I am now working as an expert witness, which basically means that I am involved in noise-induced hearing loss claims primarily. I also do some work on hand-arm vibration claims, and I get given a bundle of papers and have to try and work out what sort of exposure the claimant had and whether the defendant or defendants did everything that they should have done. So in English law, we are expected to work for the court. So regardless of who you're paid by, you're expected to be completely impartial. And there have been experts who've got themselves into all sorts of trouble for being less than. So you definitely do your best to be as clear as you can be, and not to be swayed by who's writing the cheque for your payment. So, noise-induced hearing loss claims. The tenet in English law is that he who brings the claim must prove the claim. So, for a hearing loss claim, somebody's got to prove that they are suffering from noise-induced hearing loss. Not always as easy as you might think, actually. I am quite staggered at some of the audiometry I see, and you think, that doesn't look like hearing loss, but the medical expert has signed to say, yes, they've got noise-induced hearing loss. Who am I to comment? And then there's the principle of excessive noise. How much noise is excessive? Typically, the courts tend to take that as whatever thresholds were in place at the time. So obviously in the 1989 regulations, that would have been 90, and now it's reduced to 85. But it's not just noise levels, although solicitors only seem to see noise levels themselves. You could actually be working in a very noisy industry, foundry industry, steel making, whatever, where you've got very high noise exposures. But actually, if the defendant has taken all reasonable steps, it's very hard then to argue negligence. So always I'm looking for what sort of evidence there is to reduce the noise, educate the worker about the risk and the steps that they needed to take to protect themselves, and also in the case of noise-induced hearing loss, hearing protection. So the same is the case for hand-arm vibration, except of course you're not looking them for them to provide them with protection, personal protective equipment, because there isn't any effective. Asbestos, silica, all the sort of health risks. You'd be looking at exactly the same sort of hierarchy of control. And yet I still read this depressingly in so many witness statements, claimants' witness statements. Noise is or noise was just part of the job. We never thought about it. We just accepted it. And quite honestly, I think it's pretty poor, isn't it? 2019, people are still accepting noise as just one of those things. They've just got to get on with it. Really? Honestly? So, this is my sort of mission statement, and it was when I worked in HSE. Nobody should be made deaf by their work. It has massive and increasing costs on people's lives. People are very unaware that they've actually done damage to their hearing until that's compounded by age-related hearing loss. They're very often not aware of it until years after the event. Tinnitus is classically associated with sensorineural hearing damage, and there's all that lack of confidence. You can't hear what people are saying to you in a crowded room. You can't make out what people are saying to you on the phone. You can't make out what your grandkids are saying to you. The neighbours are banging on the walls because your television's up at a billion decibels. You know, it's just miserable. And even with the best hearing aids, it will augment and replace some of the loss that you've got, but it won't replace it all. So yes, I firmly believe that people who've been negligently exposed to noise should be compensated for that. But it doesn't, not every claim you see has merit. That's a polite way, isn't it, of saying that not all of them are terribly credible. But ultimately, like the little girl standing here in front of a set of spinning machines in the textiles industry, we no longer accept other 19th century working conditions, but people don't seem to have moved that thinking on with noise. Isn't that absolutely depressing? What does that say about us as a profession historically and what we're doing now? Now, the other little point on the bottom, I will talk about claimants as though they're male, and that's because there are actually female claimants. In fact, I wrote a report only last week on a female claimant, but there are very few. For some reason, women don't seem to get too hooked up about hearing loss. Maybe it's because they don't have to listen to their husbands, I don't know. But anyway, most claimants are male, so I will automatically default to the male pronoun, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all male. So, thinking about HSE action. This is the only HSE prosecution on noise that I could find that has been taken in recent years. Which is pretty poor, isn't it, really, when you think about the number of... Yes. And actually, this is an investigation that I kicked off before I left HSE in 2013. Again, they actually... it was a Yorkshire firm. It was like the Dark Ages. They filled up foam cushions for upholstery to say, so nothing about their fire risks. Oh my God, it was horrific. Lighting levels, multiple handling issues. It was awful, but the noise. It was a very low ceiling, converted. Might have been a cinema, something like that. It was some quite low ceiling block, very poor sort of airflow and ventilation through it. And again, it was a bit like being inside a metal dustbin, being brayed hard. And they produced these filling machines, and they were carefully positioned right in the centre of the workshop, in the workplace, so that it meant that absolutely everybody, even if they were doing really quite quiet work, all enjoyed the benefit. And they'd had various noise surveys done, all of which were woeful. And they only said things like, our old friend, wear hearing protection, nothing about any sort of engineering control. So, statistics from the Department for Work and Pensions, looking at people's reason people claim against employers' liability insurance, because if you actually get awarded a compensation payout, then the DWP will take the benefits they've paid you back. It's all good stuff, isn't it, really? So looking at that, pretty shocking landscape. There's the top 10 causes, and by far and away, occupational deafness. 16,000 cases. It's pretty appalling, isn't it? When the likes of asbestosis and mesothelioma, we're talking a couple of thousand, 2,000-3,000, and the others are all incredibly small. And yet, in terms of time and attention given, you can't even say, well, the others like asbestos have regulations attached to them, because noise has been regulated since 1989, and before that there was the sort of Factories Act equivalent of a approved code of practice, published in 1972. The Woodworking Act has been regulated, the woodworking industry has been regulated since 1974. So there's been all the legal scaffolding in place, and yet we've still got this number of deafness claims. You know, as an employer, wondering why your employer's liability insurance has gone up through the roof to crippling levels, that slide really says it all, doesn't it? And yet it's quietly happening. So these figures are slightly out of date. 2015 was the last time I could find any sort of publication on claims notifications, which finished in 2014. Certainly, anecdotally, talking to people in the insurance industry, and just from our own experience of the sort of inquiries we get about report writing, you know, numbers haven't dropped really. They're certainly at least at the level of 2014. 70 million per year in compensation and reserves. I mean, we're talking billions of pounds being set aside. Or, so again, anecdotally, I have no proof of this, but you know, it seems that people are sort of selling on that risk to other insurers, other companies, other countries. Now, initially, people thought that noise-induced hearing loss claims would drop off. There was some changes to the legal process. The Jackson reforms came into civil claims, and they thought there was a big bubble of claims going through in 2013 with people sort of trying to get through before these claims finished. But actually, there's been no dropping off at all. The government keeps talking about capping payouts for noise-induced hearing loss claims in the same way that they've done with road traffic incidents. But again, that's not occurred, and obviously they're going to have other things beginning with B to think about for the next couple of years. So the noise-induced hearing loss claims bus continues to roll. And the other thing is, you know, initially, you know, we thought that claims would drop because basically our whole sort of process of extractive industries had completely dropped. There's no more coal mines. Steelworks are disappearing off the face of the earth. You know, all these traditionally noisy industries were ceasing. We were moving to a much lighter manufacturing base and much more service industries. So, you know, actually I now get to write claims on all sorts of bizarre things, all sorts of people doing upholstery, light engineering, steel bashing work is a permanent feature of my world. Bakeries, get quite a lot from them. You know, there's some industries that, again, if you were an inspector going in, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, here's a really noisy industry. Well, no, there's odd little bits maybe, but noise is not necessarily, you know, a big part until you get the claim in, and suddenly people go, so, you know, even if you happen to be involved in industries or advising industries where noise has not traditionally been seen as an issue, it's perhaps something that you need to think about and advise on. So another reason for escalating claims is the claims management companies are marvellous. They have the sort of claims equivalent of the chugger standing at the supermarket. Old Giffer on, you know, doing his shopping with his wife. You know, have you worked in a noisy industry? Yes, I have. Does your wife shout at you, the television's too loud? Yes, she does. Well, you've been working in a noisy industry. Then here, you'll get your compo and you can spend it all on a trip to some Costa somewhere. Well, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years down the line when they're standing in front of the judge, they may wish they'd never actually put the tick in the box. But, you know, that all helps to add volumes of claims. They're seen as quite profitable. There's lots of new players. Claimant solicitors come and go, I have to say, with monotonous regularity. But they sell claims onto each other. It's all very strange. And one big change was that previously claimants could be liable for costs. There are now all sorts of conditional fee arrangements in place that means basically they're at no risk. They might get a payout, but it might be a bit of bother, but actually they lose nothing financially. So it's much easier now. There's the Employers Liability Tracing Office, which means it's much easier for claimant solicitors to identify historical insurers. So really, everything's against employers. It's very easy for people to make claims on minimal evidence and minimal effort for themselves. And here's one thing that links in with Chris's presentation and will link in with Joel's. The noise at source versus hearing protection. We've got I don't know whether you recognise this style of work. We've got the guy with the jackhammer who's actually got his hearing protection on. Bless him, well done him. Why is he actually making the hole in the road that way? It's a question we may wish to ask. And it looks like it's actually got some sort of noise suppression on it with the collar on it. So, it'll still be kicking out about 100 dB, but at least it's not 130, so that's a bonus. And then we've got the two guys doing whatever it is they're doing in front of him. And I'm very pleased to see, you possibly can't read it from there, but on the back of their high-vis it says safety matters. Good, well I'm glad safety matters because health obviously doesn't, because it doesn't look like either, well certainly the one with the shovel is wearing hearing protection, and probably the one with the brush isn't either. So they're all quite happily enjoying noise, but it's all right, they've got the high-vis on, so they're utterly protected from everything. I quite often get cases in where the claimant and defendant solicitors have agreed a cut-off date on the basis that that was when hearing protection was provided. And I have to say I'm always a little bit sceptical, because here's some pictures that I and my colleagues have taken at visits, that illustrate the marvels of hearing protection use. We've got the guy with the iPod or whatever it is, headphones in. There are other makes of MP3 player available. And he's doing a really boring job. Yeah, I might want to listen to music, but they're utterly unaware. God knows what sort of level he's got that turned up to. And as his manager, you'd have no idea, would you? We've got the classic EAR plug in the classic protection zone. I mean, that's not too far out. You see people on the television. Greg Wallace is my own particular favourite. He only seems to be able to wear them like that. Well, is that providing you the amount of protection that you need? Well, no, frankly, it's not. And then we've got the Howard light, laser light position. We call this the storage position. Well, yes, they were wearing hearing protection. They certainly weren't wearing it properly or effectively. And then finally, we've got the pair of attractive earmuffs. And again, you'll see when people get issued with earmuffs, the first thing they do is they go like that to comfify it, because you don't really want those horrible plastic things pressing against your head. Disarranges your hair, doesn't it? So, yeah, I'm always very sceptical when people say, it's all right, we provided so-and-so with hearing protection, So, and quite often, again, I'm reading documentation that was created 30, 40 years ago. So it's not really enough to say on the documentation that hearing protection was provided. Was it really suitable? And by suitable, does that mean it provided enough protection but not too much, so that people were completely unaware of what was going on around them and wanted to take it off before they sort of went completely stir crazy? If you wear it for only half the necessary time, you only get a reduction of 3 decibels over your shift. It's not really very effective, is it? So you need information, instruction and training and demonstration that it's taken seriously by management, i.e. they wear it when they come onto the shop floor, even if they're not there for very often. It's really not a magic bullet at all. And this hearing protection case study is based on a firm that I came across when I worked for HSC. And as I recall, they made metal bits to go onto glass screens. You know, the sort of things that sort of connect the side, and you see them on bus stops and stuff like that, and bank things. And they employed about 100 people. Well, when I went on site, there was a clue that there was a problem with their hearing protection provision and use, even as I got into the car park, because all around, I got out of the car and all you could see was hundreds of EAR plugs just sort of littering the car park. I thought, this is a bit strange. And then I went in, and they'd got hearing protection dispensers absolutely everywhere. And yeah, their workforce were sort of wearing hearing protection, not very well put in, the Greg Wallace version. And what they'd got a huge punch press, again positioned very carefully so that everybody could see it, right in the centre of their workshop, so that it meant everybody could feel the love for this thing, because they'd actually made quite a big investment in it. It was quite a nice piece of kit. It made a noise like a bag of spanners. It was horrendous, and it was on most of the day. So even though most of their work was like fitting fiddly little grub screws and bagging them up at these connectory things, and people were sat around at benches all around the edge, all they could hear all day was the noise of this ruddy grey punch press. And oddly, their workforce weren't very happy either. So the health and safety guy was struggling to get his management to invest in doing something with the noise from this ruddy huge punch press. So I said to him, how much do you spend a year on hearing protection? And he looked a bit blank, and he said, oh, that comes out of a different budget. That's not out of my budget. And I went, well, how many sets of hearing protection do you use a day? So we went and chatted to a couple of the workers. Well, they used 2 pairs, at least 2 pairs, because actually they would go for their break, take them out in the bait room, and then they'd put another pair in, and then they'd go for lunch, take them out, put another pair in when they came back. So effectively it was 4, but we cut it down to 2. We thought, well, not, most normal workers would only use about, say, 2. So 2 pairs of earplugs per day. They were very, very busy, so they'd got 6-day working and, say, 48 weeks a year. And so here's some, very unspecial, very unfunky earplugs. And we are talking about, anywhere between £2,000 and £8,000 per year on hearing protection. That doesn't include, when we look back in their records, the, on average, 3 visits a year made to this firm by Dynarod to clear their drains of all the earplugs that had gone down the storm drains. Yeah, but, So on that basis, I said to him, I can write you a big notice, and it could be a right pain, or we can take this to your managing director, and we can go, okay, you've actually got quite a lot of skills and abilities here. I'll draw you something on the back of a fag packet, and you can make an enclosure around this thing so that only the guy operating the punch press has to use it. So sure enough, we did, and they were all thrilled, and it was all very lovely. And so it was only the guy in the enclosure who actually had to wear hearing protection, and he elected to use earmuffs because he found them much more comfortable. So there we are, 1 pair of earmuffs about every 6 months, say. The cost savings were terrific. But it's trying to get people to think about it in that way. We actually protected 99 workers straight off. No need for any continuing risk assessment, audiometry records, any sort of back covering. We stuck an enclosure around this thing. It wasn't ideal to stick an enclosure around this thing, but that was, the retrofit solution. And we saved a whole load of hassle. Also, they no longer needed to carry out health surveillance on their 99 workers. So, in summary, HSC action on noise, I'm afraid, is unlikely. We had a big training course in place, so you might find companies where inspectors are interested in noise, but it's not that common. Civil claims, however, are happening to everybody. We're looking at historic liability back to 1963, which is when the first authoritative guidance on noise was published, noise in the worker. That only applied to noise in factories. The 1972 guidance then applied to absolutely everybody. And so, really, companies are finding themselves in a position where where they need to keep records to successfully defend a claim. They need to keep records for about 50 years. Hearing protection, obviously not the answer. So actually, why not just engineer out the hassle, get it sorted out, and then you're sorted now and in the future.